My name is Grace Martins, 37 years old, and I never thought the people I sacrificed everything for would erase me like I never existed. I paid my parents' mortgage for 12 years, quietly, consistently, without asking for anything in return. And then, one day, they handed the house to my younger sister like it was always meant to be hers. No warning. No thank you. Just a key and a smile. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you're ready to stop apologizing for being the strong one. The room was warm with sunlight and filled with the smell of lemon cleaner, but I felt cold, numb, like the ground beneath my feet had quietly dropped out from under me. My mother looked at me, not with shame, not with guilt, but with expectation, as if I was supposed to be happy for them. Happy that the home I bled for was no longer mine. "Isn't it wonderful?" my mom said, her voice as cheerful as ever. "You always said you didn't want to live here forever, and Lily needs a place of her own now that she's pregnant." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. Only silence. A long, breaking silence that felt like glass between us. And in that moment, all I could think was, 12 years. 12 years of sacrifices, of skipped vacations, of working weekends, of wiring every spare dollar to their account because they said they were drowning. And now, I'm not even part of the conversation. I turned to Lily, my baby sister, 6 years younger, makeup perfect, belly barely showing, and she had the audacity to wink, like this was some joke only she and fate were in on. That was the moment something cracked. Not just in my heart, but in my understanding of everything, of family, of loyalty, of where I actually stood in a house I thought I was saving. I said nothing. I walked out the back door and down the worn stone path I'd helped my dad lay with my own 2 hands. I sat on the edge of the old wooden bench by the lemon tree. The sun lit up the yard just right. Birds chirped. Somewhere, a neighbor's sprinkler ticked rhythmically against cement, and I cried. Not loud. Not messy. Just the kind of crying that leaks from somewhere deep inside you, silent and hot. The kind you don't even try to stop because it's not about one moment, it's about everything. That bench. I used to sit there every Saturday after mowing the lawn for my parents when they said they couldn't afford a gardener. Lily never mowed anything. She used to giggle from the patio while I worked up a sweat, pretending it was my therapy. I remember once I got heat stroke out here, and my dad just handed me a Gatorade and said, "Don't be dramatic." It wasn't just this moment. It was years, layered, hidden, buried under obedience and love and a desperate hope to be seen. But you don't just end up here. You get here. And to explain that, I have to take you back. Back before Lily was pregnant, before the house felt like a battlefield, before I started questioning whether love was just another word for manipulation in my family. Back to 12 years ago. It was 2012. I was 25. Fresh out of grad school, working my first real job as a financial analyst in downtown L.A. I remember the excitement, my own apartment, finally affording organic groceries, calling my mom every night on the way home just to feel close to something familiar. That's when it started. My dad called me on a Sunday morning. No preamble. Just, "We're behind on the mortgage. 3 months. Banks threatening foreclosure." I remember the shame in his voice, and the silence behind it, like my mom was there, too proud to speak. They weren't extravagant people, not the type to waste money on boats or golf memberships, but the 2008 crash hit hard. My dad's construction contracts dried up. My mom's part-time teaching job wasn't enough. They were older, tired, and afraid. I didn't hesitate, not for a second. "Tell me what you need," I said. They needed $3,800. I had $4,200 in my savings account, and that was the first deposit, the first of many. The next month they were behind again. Then my dad's truck broke down. Then my mom needed dental surgery. It never ended. But I didn't think twice. Because that house, it was ours. It was birthday parties and scraped knees and prom photos on the stairs. It was the last thing we had that felt solid after everything else had started unraveling. They told me it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. I believed them. And maybe that's on me. By the end of that year, I was transferring $2,500 a month, every month. I gave up my apartment and moved into a cheaper place. I stopped going out. When promotions came, I increased the help. Not just mortgage, but utilities, groceries, repairs. I was the safety net, the silent lifeline. I never called it mine, not out loud, but in my heart. I thought, someday this would be repaid, not in money, but in truth, in acknowledgement, in love. Meanwhile, Lily was living in New York, acting school, modeling gigs, dating men who bought her designer handbags and flew her to Cancun for the weekend. She was the wild one, the pretty one, the baby, the one who never called unless she needed something, and they loved her for it. She was the spark. I was the structure. But I didn't mind. I thought they saw me, really saw me, until the day I didn't get an invite to the dinner. 3 weeks ago, it was a family dinner, they said. Just small. "Oh, we didn't think you'd want to drive out that late," my mom texted after the fact. It was just Lily and Thomas anyway. Thomas, her boyfriend of 6 months, now fiancé, and the father of her unborn child. They had dinner. In the house I pay for. Without me, I almost let it go. Almost. But something told me to show up unannounced the following weekend, just to say hi, just to remind them who I was. That's when I saw the file folders on the table, real estate documents, deed transfer forms, a yellow sticky note with "For Lily plus Thomas" in my mom's careful handwriting. I didn't say anything then. I waited until today. The day Lily walked in, kissed my mom on the cheek, picked up that silver key, and said, "So it's official?" And my mom nodded, eyes gleaming. Welcome home. Welcome home. Like I never existed. Like this home was always hers. And now I'm standing in my childhood backyard, 20 feet from the door they've just locked behind them, wondering how long this betrayal has been unfolding behind my back. I wipe my face. I stand up. And I realize I have one choice. I can let this break me. Or I can find out just how much they think I'm willing to take. Because if they thought I'd stay silent forever, they were wrong. Very, very wrong. Before everything shattered, I had this belief that loyalty earned love, that if I showed up, stayed steady, held the line when everyone else fell apart, I'd be rewarded. Not with praise or parades, just with belonging, with respect, with home. And for a while, it looked like I was right. Life was busy, sure, but I liked it that way. I had a rhythm that worked for me. Wake up at 6, spin class by 7, work by 9, in my corner office with floor-to-ceiling views of the L.A. skyline. I wasn't rich, but I was doing well. I had systems, spreadsheets, emergency funds. I was the friend people called when their car broke down or their landlord raised the rent. Reliable, put together. A graceful grace, one of my coworkers called me once, half joking, half envious. But it wasn't grace. It was pressure. I was holding up a world that wasn't meant to be mine alone. Every month, on the 1st, I wired $1,500 to my parents. I had it down to a science, budgeted like a second rent. I didn't question it. That money wasn't extra. It was essential. They were my parents. They gave me everything they had when I was growing up. This was just me giving back. And honestly, a part of me liked it. It made me feel valuable. On Sundays, I'd drive from Westwood to the Valley, groceries in tow, just to drop them off and check in. My mom would pretend she didn't need help, fluttering around the kitchen like everything was fine, even as her knees cracked with every step. My dad would sit in his recliner, remote in hand, talking to me without making eye contact, like emotions might spill out if he met my eyes too long. They never asked for much. They never had to, because I was already giving it. That house, white stucco, rose bushes out front, the creaky gate that never latched right. It meant more to me than any apartment or condo I'd ever lived in. It was where I learned to ride a bike, where my mom cut my hair on the porch during the recession, where I caught Lily sneaking in at 2 a.m., wearing a glittery tube top and reeking of tequila. I thought it would always be there. I thought I would always be part of it. Lily was always different. Where I was structure, she was sparkle. She breezed in and out of our lives like a wind chime. Loud, unpredictable, beautiful if you weren't too close. My mom adored her. My dad, well, he didn't not adore her. He just didn't understand her. She left for New York at 19, armed with a dream and 3 suitcases of designer knockoffs. The plan was acting, or modeling, or both. None of it quite landed. There were stints in Miami, Vegas, Austin. Sometimes months would go by without a single call. Then she'd reappear on Thanksgiving with perfect skin and a new story. And somehow, my parents always made room. They never judged her. They saved that for me. Once, I brought home a guy I was dating, Adam, lawyer, kind eyes, not a showman. My dad took one look at him and said, "He's too boring for you." Lily brought home a DJ who smelled like weed and forgot my mom's name, and they set an extra place at the table like he was royalty. I used to think it was funny. I used to think I didn't mind, because I was the one they could rely on. But deep down, I noticed the pattern, how my wins were met with polite nods, but Lily's were celebrated like Olympic gold. How every time I asked for space, I was called selfish, but when Lily disappeared, they called it finding herself. How my sacrifices were quiet expectations, and hers were heroic when she made them once in a decade. Still, I kept showing up, because that was the deal. That was what good daughters did. I had dreams too. They just got pushed to the back. At 29, I'd been saving for a down payment on a small place near Culver City. 2 bedrooms, lots of light. But that was the year my dad's truck engine gave out. They needed $6,000 fast. I remember sitting in front of the listing, fingers hovering over the schedule viewing button, and then switching tabs to my bank account and wiring the money instead. They never asked me not to buy a place, but the implication was clear. "You're so generous," my mom said that week, voice thick with emotion. Not like some people. She didn't name Lily. She didn't have to. When I turned 32, I told my mom I was thinking about freezing my eggs. Not because I had a partner, but because I didn't want the door to close on motherhood just yet. She winced, said it was a lot of money for something that might never happen. But when Lily announced she was pregnant at 31 with a guy she'd been dating for 3 months, my mom sobbed with joy. "You're going to be such a beautiful mother," she said. "We'll do whatever it takes to help you." I swallowed that moment like a stone. Still, I came over that Sunday with soup and prenatal vitamins. Because what else was I supposed to do? They were family. I told myself that love looked different for each of us. That maybe my way of being loved was quiet, sturdy, unshakable. That it didn't have to be loud or visible to be real. That was my biggest mistake. Assuming that love, once earned, was permanent. I should have noticed the shift. It was small at first. My mom started mentioning Lily's name more. "Lily thinks we should paint the house. Lily says we should redo the kitchen." Once, I came over and there were paint samples taped to the hallway wall. Lily hadn't lived there in years. Then came Thomas. The first time I met him, I knew something was off. Too polished. Too interested in what my parents owned. He looked around the house like it was a showroom. Called my dad, sir, and my mom, ma'am, which they loved. I caught him glancing at the framed deed on the bookshelf, the one with both my parents' names still listed even though I paid nearly all the mortgage. "He's just respectful," my mom said when I brought it up, and he really wants to help take care of Lily. Take care of Lily? Funny. No one ever said that about me. That's when I started hearing whispers about them moving closer to the city. Lily didn't like the valley, apparently. Too suburban. Too far from the action. And my parents, suddenly, were considering it. I thought this was your forever home, I said one day, trying to keep my voice light. My dad shrugged. Things change. And yet, they still cashed my wire transfers every month. Still let me haul groceries up their driveway, fix the garbage disposal when it jammed, schedule their doctor's appointments. Still called me when their internet went out. Still expected me to be graceful Grace. Until the Sunday I wasn't invited. Until the moment I realized that being dependable had become my identity, not my value. And I started to wonder if the only reason they held on to me at all was because I held on to them. Because I never said no. Because I never made it hard. Because I didn't sparkle like Lily. And that made me easy to ignore. But now, the sparkle was moving in. And I had this gut feeling, deep, burning, undeniable, that they were preparing for a shift, a handoff, a replacement, a betrayal dressed in baby showers and nursery paint. And I had no idea that the thing I'd feared most was already in motion. That they weren't just giving her a key. They were rewriting the will. I didn't confront them right away. I couldn't. It's like part of me refused to believe what I'd seen. The file folder labeled with Lily's name, the mortgage deed partially signed, the home equity paperwork with my dad's blocky signature and Thomas's handwriting in the margin. My body walked out of the house, but my mind stayed there. Hovering, spinning, repeating, trying to make it make sense. I drove home in silence that night, the kind of silence that feels loud. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't answer texts. My phone buzzed with a message from my mom, something casual. Thanks for the groceries. As if nothing had happened. As if she didn't just let me walk past the blueprint of betrayal without even blinking. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I threw my phone across the room. It didn't break. I almost wished it had. That week at work, I couldn't focus. I kept staring at spreadsheets, numbers blurring into nothing, meetings becoming background noise. My assistant asked if I was okay. I lied, told her I was tired, but inside, I was unraveling. I didn't eat much, couldn't sleep. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., replaying every memory, every sacrifice, every phone call I had made where I'd said, "Don't worry, I've got it." And then came the phone call that confirmed everything. It was a Thursday. I was standing in the kitchen, microwaving leftover quinoas when my mom called. Her voice was bright, almost too bright. "We have some exciting news," she said. "Lily and Thomas are moving in next weekend." I froze. My hand still on the microwave door, half open. "They're what?" "Moving in. We just think it's best. You know, with the baby coming, and they need the space, and we're getting older, it just makes sense." I didn't respond. She filled the silence. "It's not a big deal. You've said yourself you don't plan to move back. This way the house stays in the family." "Stay in the family." I blinked, swallowed hard. "I am family," I said, my voice low and sharp. "Grace," she sighed, already in that condescending tone I knew too well. "Don't make this about you." That was it. That was the line. That one sentence shattered everything. I hung up. Then I dropped to the floor, knees to cold tile, hands shaking, breath caught somewhere between a scream and a sob. It was like I had no body, no weight, just a floating thing trying to attach itself to a version of reality that no longer existed. I cried. Ugly, desperate, choking tears that wouldn't stop. I think part of me was mourning. Not just for the house, not even for the money, but for who I thought I was in their lives. I always thought I was the anchor. Turns out, I was just the spare rope. The next few days were a blur of spiraling thoughts and contradictions. 1 hour I was sure I'd confront them, tell them everything, demand they acknowledge what they'd done. The next, I felt paralyzed, afraid that maybe this was my fault, that maybe I was being dramatic, selfish. Maybe this was love, and I just didn't know how to receive it properly. Shame has a twisted way of convincing you to stay silent. It wasn't just sadness. It was rage, too. I started replaying all the years I'd said no to myself, no to vacations, no to a mortgage of my own, no to dating seriously, because I couldn't afford emotional or financial risk. I gave them everything, and they gave me nothing that counted. The real breaking point came a week later. My aunt called, my mom's sister, Cheryl, the only person in the family who ever really saw me. She sounded hesitant. "I wanted you to hear it from me," she said. "I got the invite in the mail. For the housewarming, Lily and Thomas. Your parents are hosting it in 2 weeks." I didn't even know what to say. Housewarming? In my house? Aunt Cheryl paused. "You didn't know, did you?" I couldn't answer. She kept talking. "Your mom said they're putting the deed in Lily's name. Said it's the least they could do since she's about to be a mother." I felt like I was floating again. But this time, the air was thicker. Like betrayal had become a physical thing in the room. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up the bank statements. Every wire transfer, every deposit, 12 years, over $200,000. I printed them. I needed the truth in black and white. Not for them, for me. I needed to see it, touch it. No, I wasn't crazy. But even as I held the pages in my hand, I felt that sick part of me, the good daughter still whispering, "Maybe don't rock the boat. Maybe just let it go. Maybe you don't need to burn everything down." But another voice, quieter, older, buried, started to rise too. And she said, "No, they don't get to rewrite the story just because they never bothered to read the chapters you wrote in blood, sweat, and missed dreams." I called my mom the next morning. I was calm. Too calm. She answered like nothing had happened. "Grace, we were just talking about you. We want you to come early to the party. Help set things up, you know. Lily said she wants you to be part of it." "Mom," I said, "is the house officially in Lily's name?" Silence. Not even breathing. Then softly, "Yes." No apology, no explanation, just a confirmation that I was right. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "And you didn't think I deserved to be told before the invitations went out?" "You weren't going to live here again, Grace," she said. "You said that. And you're doing so well. Lily's starting a new chapter. She needs stability. And I don't," my voice cracked. "After everything I gave, you gave it because you wanted to," she snapped. "Don't turn it into a transaction." It was a slap, not physical, but spiritual, like she had wiped away 12 years with one sentence. I hung up. And this time, I didn't cry. This time, I froze. It was a different kind of collapse. Not loud, not hysterical, just the feeling of doors closing, windows locking, light fading. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always explode. Sometimes it seeps, slow and corrosive, like mold behind the walls. You don't know how sick you've gotten until you're coughing up pieces of yourself. I stopped going to work, didn't return messages. My friends thought I was busy. I told them I was fine. But inside, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Was I still a good daughter? Was I ever? I sat for hours in my apartment, staring at walls, rereading old texts from my parents like a detective looking for clues in a dead language. I looked through photo albums, birthday parties, graduations, Sunday barbecues, and I kept asking myself the same thing. Was it all fake? Or was I just invisible the whole time? There's a specific kind of grief that comes when people you love are still alive. A living death. And in that quiet, I realized something. I had been grieving my family for years. I just didn't know it yet. There's a strange quiet that comes after emotional devastation. Not peace, not numbness, just stillness. I stopped answering my mom's calls, deleted the family group chat, the one with all the birthday pictures, baby bump updates, and Lily's nauseating bump dates hashtag. I couldn't take it. Couldn't keep watching my sister play house in a home I'd practically built while pretending I didn't exist. I told work I needed a leave of absence, stress-related, which wasn't even a lie. I was unraveling, cell by cell. My manager was understanding. Too understanding. She asked if I needed help, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't even know what help looked like anymore. I stopped setting alarms, ate whatever I could microwave, drank wine at noon, watched old HGTV reruns and scoffed every time someone said dream home. I unfollowed my sister on Instagram, blocked Thomas. Mute wasn't enough. Seeing their faces made me feel like I was drowning in cement. I was untethered. My identity had always been Grace the dependable, Grace the planner, Grace the good daughter. Now, I was none of those things. I wasn't talking to my parents. I wasn't working. I wasn't even taking care of myself. And I hated how bitter I was becoming. I hated that Lily still smiled in every picture, that my mom still baked cookies every Sunday like we hadn't split the family open, and that I was the one falling apart in the shadows, like I was the problem. After a few weeks of spiraling, a friend of mine, Nora, my old college roommate, dragged me out for coffee. She said she was worried, said I looked gray, said she barely recognized me. I shrugged it off, said I just needed rest. She looked at me like she didn't believe a word. Then she pulled a card out of her purse. "Her name's Mira," she said. "She's a therapist, not cheap, but she helped me after my divorce, and she doesn't let you hide." I stuffed the card in my bag. Didn't call. Not then. Instead, I did the opposite of healing. I started drinking more. Sleeping with someone I met at a bar. Jacob, I think. Maybe Jason. It didn't matter. He didn't ask questions. Just like the way I looked when I pretended to be okay. I told myself I was taking control, that I was living a little. But really, I was running. Until one night, I blacked out in my own bathroom. Wine, sleeping pills, and emptiness. Not enough to do real damage, but enough to scare me. I woke up on the floor, cheek pressed against the cold tile, and thought, this is what rock bottom feels like. That's when I called Mira. Her voice was calm, measured. Not overly sweet. She didn't coddle me, just listened. I sat on her couch that first session, arms crossed, eyes hollow, and said, "I'm not here to blame anyone. I just don't know who I am anymore." She nodded, said nothing. Let the silence burn until I started crying. Week by week, we peeled back the layers. We talked about patterns, about how I'd always needed to be the fixer, about how my parents had trained me, subtly, lovingly, to believe that my value came from sacrifice. How love in my family had always been conditional, disguised as gratitude. She helped me see that I was addicted, not to chaos, but to usefulness. That I kept giving because I thought that was how I'd be chosen. But I was never chosen. I was used. There's a difference. Still, healing wasn't linear. One morning, I felt strong. I made breakfast, stretched, journaled, thought I was turning a corner. Then I saw the Facebook post. A photo of Lily on the front porch of my parents' house, holding a set of keys. My dad standing behind her, beaming. My mom kissing her forehead. The caption read, "Starting our new chapter. Couldn't have done it without family." Family. That word hit like a hammer. I felt bile rise in my throat. It wasn't just a photo. It was a statement. A rewriting of history in broad daylight. As if they had helped her build that life. As if I didn't exist. I slammed my laptop shut, stood up, punched the wall, broke 2 knuckles, and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a kid. Because that was the moment I realized they were never going to give me closure. They weren't going to apologize. They weren't going to make it right. They weren't going to see me the way I needed to be seen. If I wanted peace, I'd have to choose it. But first, I had to let go. The hardest part wasn't blocking their numbers. It wasn't unfriending Lily. It wasn't even skipping the baby shower invite that came in the mail 2 weeks later, wrapped in pink ribbons and fake sentiment. It was grieving the dream I'd carried since I was a teenager. That one day, my parents would turn to me, eyes full of pride, and say, "You were the reason we made it. We see you. We love you. We're proud." That dream died in Mira's office on a rainy Wednesday. And I mourned it. I lit a candle, wrote a letter to the version of me that kept hoping. Then I folded it, burned it in the sink, and cried quietly as the ash swirled down the drain. Mira called it a ritual of release. It felt more like a funeral, but something shifted after that. I stopped waiting for permission to move on. I stopped checking their social media. I stopped pretending I didn't want more for myself. I sold half my furniture, cut my hair, signed up for a 2-week hiking retreat in Colorado. No cell service, just trees, silence, and strangers who didn't know a thing about me. On the last day of that trip, I met someone, not romantically. Her name was Brenda, mid-50s, former ICU nurse, wide shoulders, laugh like thunder, eyes that had seen too much but still sparkled. She noticed me staring at the mountains one morning, silent and still. "You grieving something?" she asked. I nodded. "Good," she said. "Means you loved deep, but don't get stuck. The best revenge is rebuilding." That sentence stuck. The best revenge is rebuilding. When I got back to LEA, I made one final decision. I hired a lawyer, not to sue. That wasn't possible. The money I sent wasn't tied to a contract. There was no legal claim to the house. But we filed a formal record of financial support, something to market, something real. I wrote a letter to my parents, not angry, not vengeful, just honest. I told them I forgave them, but I was done playing the quiet role in their drama. I wouldn't be attending the baby shower, or the christening, or the family barbecues. This was my boundary, and it wasn't up for negotiation. Then I turned off my phone, and for the first time in a long time, I breathed. Healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk through the door with a soundtrack and confetti. It's quiet, subtle. You notice it when you wake up one morning and realize you're not afraid of the silence anymore. That was me. 3 months after I sent that letter to my parents, I stood in front of my mirror with wet hair, no makeup, a chipped mug of tea in hand, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a woman I respected. Not because she was perfect, but because she survived. The old me would have kept pouring into people until I disappeared. The new me. She paused. She asked questions. She protected her peace like it was sacred, which, honestly, it is. After the wilderness phase, I didn't rush back into the world. I eased in. I started by reworking my daily routine. Up at 6, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Meditation, journaling, walking barefoot on the dewy grass behind my apartment complex, something Mira said would rewire my nervous system. It sounded ridiculous, until it worked. My mind slowed down, my body softened. Food tasted better. Music made me feel again. I returned to work part-time, but not as the overachiever, not as the yes woman. I created boundaries, blocked off time, said no to extra projects that didn't feed me. My boss, who I thought would be disappointed, actually smiled. "You're sharper now," she said, "more focused." And she was right. Pain clears the fog. I also took a risk, one I'd been avoiding for years. I finally launched the side project I used to daydream about, but never had the time or courage to pursue: a financial coaching platform for women in transition, divorcees, single moms, women recovering from financial trauma, women like me. I called it Root and Rise. At first, it was just blog posts and workshops hosted in a borrowed co-working space, but within a month, my inbox was full. Women sharing their stories, asking for help, thanking me for speaking openly about things they were taught to stay quiet about. One message read, "You made me believe I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed by my own family. Thank you." That one made me cry. Not the broken kind of cry, the healed kind. The kind where your heart overflows instead of breaks. And somewhere along that path, love found me. It started at a bookshop of all places. I was scanning the finance aisle for inspiration when a man bumped into me, knocking a copy of The Psychology of Money to the ground. He picked it up, apologized, and said, "That one's good, but this one saved me." He handed me Your Money or Your Life. His name was Ian. Tall, calm, a software engineer turned urban farmer who had left his Silicon Valley burnout behind to run a rooftop garden program for underserved schools. We talked for 2 hours in that aisle. By the end of the week, we had our first date. Low-key, homemade ramen and jazz records. I told him everything. Not all at once, but piece by piece. He never flinched. He never said, "That's too much." He just listened, held space, asked real questions, called me out when I minimized my pain. "This isn't just a family story," he said once. "It's a self-worth story." He was right. The betrayal hurt because I believed I had to earn love by erasing myself. Now I knew better. Ian never tried to fix me. He just stood beside me while I rebuilt. And slowly, I did. My apartment transformed too. I painted the walls a deep forest green, added a vintage gold mirror I found at a flea market, planted herbs on the balcony and watched them thrive. I was thriving too. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't a daughter trying to be chosen. I was a woman choosing herself. And then, just as life began to feel whole again, not perfect, but real, something happened. It was a Saturday. I was setting up for a Root and Rise workshop at a local women's center when I got a text from my aunt, Cheryl. It was a photo of my mother sitting at a park bench, holding a baby, Lily's baby. The caption said, "I thought you'd want to know. She's asking about you." I stared at that photo for a long time, not because I missed them, but because something inside me stirred. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was curious. Why now? Why reach out? Why open that door? I didn't respond right away. I took the weekend to sit with it. And as I sat, I realized I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need them to change. I had changed. But that didn't mean I wouldn't speak. That didn't mean I wouldn't confront the truth. Because healing is not forgetting. Healing is remembering without surrendering your power. So I texted Cheryl back. Tell her I'm open to a conversation. But this time, it happens on my terms. And then I closed my phone, breathed in, breathed out, and went back to my workshop. The room was filled with women of all ages. One held a toddler on her hip. Another had a scar across her wrist. Another wore a fresh divorce on her face like a badge she wasn't ready to show yet. I looked at them, standing in a semicircle, waiting. And I said, "You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not selfish for wanting boundaries. You are not wrong for expecting more. The ones who told you to shrink didn't know how to handle your shine. But that's not your burden anymore." That was the moment I knew I wasn't broken. I was becoming. And soon, I would stand face to face with the people who had tried to rewrite my story. But this time, I'd bring the pen. I hadn't stepped foot inside that house in over a year, not since Lily picked up that silver key and called it hers. Now, I was back, not as the daughter desperate to belong, not as the fixer. I was here as someone whole. I stood at the curb, hands at my sides, not carrying groceries or bills or expectations. Just me, healed, heavy with truth. The house looked the same on the outside. White stucco, neatly trimmed rose bushes, fresh paint on the shutters, Lily's touch, no doubt. But something was different. I wasn't here to fit in anymore. I was here to close the loop. I walked up the path I used to rake every fall, now covered in chalk drawings and tiny toy cars. The door was open. I didn't knock. Inside, laughter floated from the kitchen. Lily, my mother, and Thomas. I paused just past the threshold. Lily saw me first. She froze. My mother turned around slowly, as if summoned by something ancient. Her smile flickered, then steadied, practiced. "Well," she said, drying her hands on a dish towel, "look who decided to come home." I didn't answer. I didn't smile. I walked in, calm as dusk. Thomas straightened awkwardly. I barely glanced at him. He wasn't the target. He was just the scaffolding for their illusion. Lily set down her drink. She wore a crisp cream blouse, gold jewelry, not a hair out of place. There was tension in her jaw, the kind that said, she thought she won. "Grace," she said, like she was testing how the name still felt in her mouth. "I'm not here to stay," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here because you asked for a conversation." My mother blinked. "We did." "No," I corrected gently. "You asked about me. There's a difference." The room shifted. Lily crossed her arms. "If this is about the house—" "It's not about the house," I said. And it wasn't. It was never about the house. It was about erasure, about rewriting history while I stood there, holding the receipts. I turned to my mother. "Do you know how many payments I made on this place?" I asked softly. She hesitated. "That's not fair." "It's not a test," I said. "It's a question. I don't know the exact number." I nodded. 278. Silence. I stepped forward, stopping just short of the kitchen island. "This isn't a confrontation. It's a mirror," I said. "Because I want you to see what I see. What I've always seen." I gestured around the room. The walls I helped keep standing, the holidays I paid for, the emergency repairs I covered when Dad's pension ran out. I was here. Every step, every fall, every storm. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Lily stayed still. "I didn't come here to make you feel guilty," I said. "I came to make something clear." I turned to Lily now. Her face was unreadable, chin high, eyes sharp, like she was trying not to blink. "You didn't steal anything from me," I said. "You took what was handed to you, like always." She scoffed lightly. "So what do you want? An apology?" "No," I said. "I want you to understand that I see you now. For real." She flinched, barely, but it was there. "You want to be the center? You want to be adored? That's fine, but don't pretend it didn't come at a cost. And don't pretend I didn't pay it." She looked away then, and that's when I saw it. The flicker of recognition. The awareness that for all her charm and shine, she'd never earned a thing the way I had. That without the handouts, without the parents cushioning every fall, she might have had to become someone real. My mother broke the silence. "We didn't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "That's the thing," I replied. "You didn't need to thank me. You just needed to see me." She stepped closer. "We loved you." "No," I said, voice calm. "Certain. You needed me." "That's different." And then I gave them the one line, the one that would echo long after I walked out the door. I looked at both of them, my mother, my sister, and said, "If I had vanished, you would have grieved the help, not the daughter." The air went still. My mother's eyes welled, but she didn't reach for me. Lily said nothing. Not because she didn't have words, but because nothing she could say would touch what had just landed. I turned to go. No hug, no forgiveness ceremony. just the quiet dignity of walking away without begging to stay. I reached the doorway, paused, then said one last thing over my shoulder. I rebuilt my life without you in it. That wasn't the tragedy. That was the miracle. And I left. I stepped into the sunlight, not with a heavy heart, but a light one. Because that wasn't my home anymore. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with stillness. The kind of stillness that settles in your bones when you no longer need to explain yourself to anyone. When peace isn't something you chase, but something that meets you right where you are. It had been 3 weeks since I walked out of that house. No dramatic follow-ups, no handwritten apologies, no surprise knock on my door, just silence. And for the first time, it didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space. Room to breathe, room to live, room to begin again. I'd started a new ritual. Saturday mornings at the local farmer's market, alone, coffee in hand, sun on my skin. I walked slowly, touched things, asked questions, learned the names of vegetables I'd never cooked, and herbs I'd only seen dried in jars. One of the vendors, an older man named Elias with a crooked smile and kind eyes, gave me a sprig of lavender every time I passed his stall. "Keep it in your bag," he said. "It calms the nervous system." I didn't tell him I'd already done the hard part of calming down, that I'd already made peace with the past. Instead, I smiled and tucked it into my tote like a secret. Root and Rise was growing. What started as a side project was turning into something real. I'd rented a small office space downtown, nothing fancy, but full of light, with a view of the city skyline that reminded me of how far I'd come. Women gathered there every week, sharing stories, spreadsheets, fears. Some cried, some laughed. All of them left standing a little taller. Sometimes I caught my reflection in the window and didn't recognize her, not because she'd changed too much, but because she finally looked like someone who belonged in her own life. Mira said healing is less about moving on, and more about moving into yourself, into your power, into the place you were always meant to be, before the world convinced you to shrink. She was right. There were days I still ached. Grief doesn't ask for permission, it just arrives. Sometimes it's triggered by a scent. Fresh basil, or the way morning light hits the corner of my bedroom. Other times, it's a song on the radio or the shape of a child's laugh. But I don't run from it anymore. I let it come, let it sit, then I let it pass. There's freedom in not needing to heal perfectly. Ian and I were still seeing each other, slowly, carefully, with boundaries and softness and honesty. He never tried to fix me. He just showed up. One night, we sat on my balcony with our feet up on a stool, sipping ginger tea. The city glowed beneath us, blurred and golden. "You're different now," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Better or worse?" He smiled. "More, you." That stayed with me. Later, when he fell asleep with his hand resting lightly on my knee, I watched him breathe in the dark and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. Not because he promised me anything, but because I no longer needed him to fill a space someone else left behind. I was full all on my own. I still haven't spoken to Lily. There's no anger left. No revenge to plot. She's living the life she always wanted. Family photos, curated captions, white picket fences. Maybe she thinks she won, maybe she did, but I didn't lose, because I'm finally living my life without waiting to be chosen, without waiting for someone to say, "You're enough." I said it first. I said it loud. There are letters I've written but never sent. One to my mom, one to Lily, even one to myself at age 25, full of hope and grit and willingness. They're tucked in a drawer beneath my journals. Sometimes I read them, not because I want closure, but because I want to remember what I survived, what I let go of, what I reclaimed. The other night, I stood barefoot in my kitchen, cooking pasta with fresh basil from my own tiny plant on the windowsill. A song came on, one my mom used to hum while she baked. I froze for a second, not with pain, with memory. Then I smiled and kept cooking, because this was my home now. Not made of beams or deeds or old family furniture. Made of choice, of truth, of the quiet certainty that I am no longer who I was. I am more. More because I broke. More because I put myself back together. And more because I stopped apologizing for wanting to be seen. The final chapter isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like lavender in a tote bag, a locked drawer of unsent letters, a full belly, a steady breath, a clean slate. Sometimes it looks like a woman walking into her own life and never looking back.